Welcome to a story of second chances and dangerous truths on the frontier. Settle in as we journey to Cedar Prairie, where the past never stays buried for long. Grace Sinclair's hands froze on the ledger the moment she heard boots on the porch. Not the familiar shuffle of her father's gait, or the quick step of the ranch hands coming for their pay. These boots moved with purpose, with the weight of a man who'd learned to walk careful in dangerous places. She knew that stride. Her chest tightened as the door swung open without a knock, and 6 years collapsed into nothing. Eli Turner stood in the doorway, taller than she remembered, broader through the shoulders, with a deputy's badge catching the afternoon light on his black vest. His dark blonde hair was longer now, touching his collar, and his face had hardened into something between the boy who'd kissed her by the creek and a stranger who'd seen too much. His eyes found hers across the small office, and for one suspended breath, neither of them moved. "You shouldn't be here," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. Eli stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The small room suddenly felt smaller. "I'm here on county business," he said, and pulled a folded document from inside his duster. Grace's throat went dry. She knew what county business meant when it came with papers and a badge. Her father had been fighting the water rights claim for 3 months, ever since the bank started pressing and the neighboring spreads began consolidating under pressure from Eastern investors. "This is a court order," Eli continued, his tone carefully flat. "High Wind Ranch water access is under dispute pending resolution of the Prairie Creek allocation hearing. You're to cease all irrigation and cattle watering from the creek effective immediately." Grace stood so fast her chair scraped back. "You can't do this. We've got 200 head that need water. The hearing isn't for another 2 weeks." Eli's jaw tightened. "I don't make the law, Grace. I just carry it." She came around the desk, close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before, close enough to catch the scent of leather and horse, and something that made her remember things she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. "You left," she said, low and fierce. "You left when this town turned on you, and now you come back wearing a badge to finish what they started?" His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I came back because I took an oath. This has nothing to do with what happened between us. Everything has to do with what happened between us," she shot back. "You think I don't know who's behind this? Thornton's been trying to buy us out for a year. Now he's got the county doing his dirty work, and you're the one delivering the knife." Eli's hand tightened on the document. "If you've got proof Thornton's manipulating the court, bring it to the sheriff. Until then, this order stands." He held out the paper. Grace didn't take it. Instead, she met his eyes and saw something there that didn't match his careful words. A tightness, a hesitation. "You know this will ruin us," she said quietly. "Without creek access, we lose the herd. Without the herd, we lose the ranch. Is that what you want?" Eli set the document on the desk between them. "What I want doesn't matter." He turned toward the door. Grace's next words came out before she could stop them. "Your father would be ashamed of you." Eli froze with his hand on the door latch. When he turned back, his face was no longer carefully blank. It was raw and hard and full of something that looked like pain, wrapped in anger. "My father died ashamed of me, Grace. Don't pretend you don't know why." The scandal. The fire. The night everything had burned down, literal and otherwise. She'd been 18, he'd been 24. and the accusations had flown fast and vicious through Cedar Prairie until there was nothing left but ash and blame. "I never believed them," she said, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. He stared at her. "Then why didn't you say so when it mattered?" "Because I was 18 and scared, and my father forbade me from seeing you ever again. Because the whole town had already made up their minds. Because you left without saying goodbye." The words hung in the air between them. 6 years of silence, finally breaking open. Eli's expression shifted, some of the hardness cracking. "I left because staying would have destroyed you too. Your father made that clear." She felt heat behind her eyes and blinked it back. "You don't get to decide what would have destroyed me." He took a step closer. The distance between them was less than an arm's length now. "Grace," he said, and his voice had lost its deputy flatness. "This order isn't personal. But if you fight it the wrong way, Thornton will bury you." She lifted her chin. "Then what's the right way?" Eli glanced toward the window, checking the yard, then back at her. "You get yourself a lawyer who can prove prior use rights. You document every head of cattle that's watered from that creek for the last decade. And you find out who's been feeding Thornton information from inside your operation. Because someone is." Grace's pulse kicked. "What do you mean?" He moved to the desk, flipped open her ledger to the shipping schedule. "Your last cattle shipment. Where'd it go?" "Fort Collins," she said. 3 weeks ago. 50 head. Eli's finger traced the line. It never arrived. Grace's stomach dropped. "That's not possible." "I have the receipt from the buyer." "Show me." She pulled open the desk drawer, rummaged through papers, found the receipt and handed it over. Eli studied it, his brow furrowing. "This is a forgery. Look at the county stamp. It's off-center, and the ink's wrong. Fort Collins uses blue. This is black." Grace felt the floor tilt under her. 50 head. Nearly a quarter of their market stock. Gone. If the buyer didn't receive them, who did? Eli folded the receipt carefully. "That's what I'm going to find out. But you need to understand something. Thornton's not just trying to buy you out. He's trying to make sure you have no choice but to sell at his price. And he's got someone on the inside helping him do it." Grace's mind raced through the possibilities. Her father's foreman had been with High Wind for 20 years. The ranch hands were local boys, most of them family friends. The cook had known Grace since she was a child. It couldn't be any of them, unless 6 years away had taught her that trust was just another word for blind. "Who do you suspect?" she asked. Eli shook his head. "I don't have names yet. But I know the pattern. Thornton did this same thing to the bar cross last year. Squeezed them on credit, sabotaged their sales, then bought the land for cents on the dollar when the bank foreclosed." Grace felt cold despite the warm room. "Why are you telling me this? You're the one serving his papers." "Because the law and justice aren't always the same thing," Eli said quietly. "And because whatever you think of me, I never stopped caring whether you survived." The admission landed between them like a stone in still water. Grace's breath caught. Before she could respond, boots thundered on the porch and the door burst open. Her father filled the frame, silver-bearded and broad-shouldered, his face dark with fury. "Get away from my daughter," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Eli straightened, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun, then stopping. "Mr. Sinclair, I was just delivering a county order." "I saw your horse," her father said. I told you 6 years ago if you ever set foot on my land again, I'd shoot you for trespassing. Grace stepped between them. Pa, stop. He's here on legal business. I don't care if he's here on God's business, her father snapped, his eyes never leaving Eli. He destroyed your reputation once. I won't let him do it again. Eli's face had gone carefully blank again, but Grace saw the muscle jump in his jaw. The reputation that got destroyed was mine, Mr. Sinclair. Your daughter's was just collateral damage. That's a lie and you know it, her father shot back. Half the town still whispers about her because of what you did. Eli's eyes flashed. What I did was try to save your property from burning down. I didn't set that fire. I tried to stop it. Then who did? Grace's father took a step forward. Eli held his ground. I don't know. But I spent 6 years trying to find out. Grace's heart hammered. You never told me that. Eli glanced at her. There was a lot I never told you, because I left before I could. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Grace's father looked between them, his expression hardening further. I want him off my land, Grace. Now. Pa, we need to talk about the water order. We'll talk about it after he's gone. Eli picked up his hat from where he'd set it on the desk. I'll go. But Grace, you need to hear this. That fire, 6 years ago, it started in the same place Thornton's men were seen the day before. And your missing cattle shipment? The forged receipt uses the same handwriting as the fire report that blamed me. Grace's blood went cold. You're saying they're connected. I'm saying someone's been working a long game, Eli said. And it's not over. He settled his hat on his head and walked toward the door. Her father stepped aside, but barely. At the threshold, Eli paused and looked back at Grace. If you need help, you know where to find me, even if you don't want it. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of something. Grace stood frozen, her mind spinning. Someone's been working a long game. The fire that had destroyed the old barn and killed 2 horses. The accusations that had driven Eli from town. The shame that had clung to her family despite her father's standing. And now, cattle missing, water rights challenged, the bank circling. All of it connected. All of it leading here. Pa, she said slowly. What if he's telling the truth? Her father's face was granite. He's a liar and a coward. He ran instead of facing what he did. Maybe he ran because staying would have gotten him killed, Grace said. You weren't there that night, Pa. I was. I saw him pull those horses out. I saw him trying to save the barn. Her father's expression shifted, something uncomfortable crossing his features. You were barely more than a girl. You saw what you wanted to see. I saw a man risk his life for our property, while everyone else stood back and watched it burn. Grace said, her voice rising. And I saw this town destroy him for it, because it was easier than admitting they'd been robbed, and they couldn't catch the real thieves. Her father's jaw worked. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me what I don't know, she challenged. Tell me why you were so quick to believe he was guilty. Tell me why you forbade me from seeing him. Tell me why you've spent 6 years acting like his name is poison. Her father turned away, looking out the window toward the corral. Because I knew if you defended him, you'd be dragged down with him. Because this town needed someone to blame, and it was going to be him or us, because I chose to protect my family. Even if it meant destroying an innocent man. Grace's voice shook. Even if it meant living with a lie. Her father was silent for a long moment. Then he said, without turning around, Eli Turner's innocence or guilt doesn't change the fact that we're about to lose this ranch. The water order is real. The bank pressure is real. Whatever game Thornton's playing, he's winning. We need to focus on that. Grace looked down at the court order still lying on her desk. Eli's words echoed in her head. If you need help, you know where to find me. She picked up the paper, folded it carefully. Then we fight, she said. We get a lawyer. We document everything. And we find out who's been feeding Thornton information. Her father finally turned back to her. And if that means working with Eli Turner? Grace met his eyes. Then that's what it means. Her father's expression was grim, but he nodded slowly. You're more like your mother every day. Stubborn as a mule and twice as dangerous when you've made up your mind. Is that a yes? It's a warning, her father said. But if you're going to do this, do it smart. Don't let your history with that boy cloud your judgment. Grace felt heat rise in her face. I'm 24 years old, Pa. I'm not a girl anymore. And Eli's not a boy. He's a deputy with a badge and information we need. Her father grunted. He's a man who broke your heart once. Don't give him the chance to do it again. He walked out, leaving Grace alone with the court order and a decision that felt like standing at a crossroads in the dark. She looked out the window. Eli was mounting his horse, a tall bay gelding that shifted under him as he settled into the saddle. He didn't look back at the house, just turned the horse toward town and rode out at an easy lope, dust rising behind him in the late afternoon sun. Grace's chest ached with something she didn't want to name. 6 years. She'd built a life in those 6 years. Learned her father's business, taken over the books, made High Wind profitable when other ranches were struggling. She'd buried the girl who'd loved Eli Turner and became a woman who didn't need anyone. Except now, she did need someone. And he was the only one offering help. Grace made her decision. She pulled off her apron, grabbed her shawl from the hook by the door, and headed for the barn. If she rode hard, she could catch him before he reached town. If she swallowed her pride, she could ask for the help they desperately needed. And if she was very, very careful, she could keep her heart out of it this time. The barn was dim and smelled of hay and horse and old leather. She saddled her mare, a quick, capable chestnut named Dancer, with practiced efficiency. As she led the mare out into the yard, her father emerged from the equipment shed. Where are you going? To town, she said. To talk to a deputy about stolen cattle and forged receipts. Her father looked like he wanted to argue. Then his shoulders sagged slightly. Be back before dark. And Grace? She paused, one foot in the stirrup. Be careful. He's not the same boy you knew. I'm not the same girl, she said, and swung into the saddle. She touched her heels to Dancer's sides, and the mare leapt forward, eager for the run. The prairie stretched wide and golden under the late sun, grass rippling in waves as the wind pushed east. Grace leaned into the speed, letting the rhythm of hooves on packed earth clear her head. She could see Eli ahead, a dark shape against the horizon. She pushed Dancer faster. The mare responded with a burst of speed that closed the distance. Eli heard her coming and reined in, turning his horse to face her. They met in the middle of the empty road, horses stamping and blowing. Eli's expression was guarded. Change your mind about that help? I need to know what you know about Thornton, Grace said, keeping her voice level. And I need to know what you meant about the fire report handwriting. Eli studied her for a moment. Then he said, Not here. Too exposed. There's a line shack about 2 miles north. We can talk there. Grace hesitated. Meeting him alone, away from the ranch, felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But they were already out here, already away from listening ears. And time was running short. Lead the way, she said. They rode north in silence, following a barely visible track through the grass. The sun was lower now, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The line shack appeared as a dark square against the prairie, weathered wood, and a sagging roof that had seen better days. Eli dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching rail. Grace did the same, her nerves humming with awareness. Inside, the shack was dusty and sparse. A table, 2 chairs, a cold stove, and a narrow bunk covered with a moth-eaten blanket. Eli moved to the table and pulled out a folded paper from his vest. This is a copy of the fire report from 6 years ago, he said, spreading it flat. Grace moved closer, reading over his shoulder. The report was brief and damning. Fire origin, deliberate. Suspect, Eli Turner, seen on property before fire started. She'd never seen the actual report before. Reading it now made her stomach turn. Now look at this. He laid the forged receipt beside it. The handwriting was different, but the style was similar. Careful, precise, with a distinctive way of forming the capital F in Fort Collins that matched the capital F in Fire Origin. Someone wrote both of these, Grace said slowly. Someone who wanted you blamed for the fire and wanted our cattle shipment to disappear. Eli nodded. I've spent the last 3 months tracking down every document related to property disputes in this county. Same handwriting shows up on deed transfers, water rights filings, foreclosure notices. All of them tied to properties that ended up in Thornton's hands. Grace's pulse quickened. So Thornton has a forger on his payroll. More than that, Eli said. He has someone in the county clerk's office. Someone with access to official documents and the authority to file them. That narrows it down to 3 people. Do you have proof? Not enough to make an arrest, but enough to start asking the right questions. He looked at her directly. If we're going to stop him, we need to move fast. The hearing's in 2 weeks. If Thornton wins the water rights, he'll force a sale. And if he gets high wind, he controls the whole northern valley. What do you need from me? Grace asked. Eli straightened. I need access to your ranch records. Sales, purchases, employee payments, everything. If someone's feeding Thornton information, there'll be a trail. Money changing hands, unexplained absences, something that doesn't fit. Grace's mind raced through the ledgers she'd been keeping for 3 years. She knew every entry, every expense. If something was wrong, she should have seen it. Unless I missed it, she said aloud. Unless I trusted someone I shouldn't have. Eli's expression softened slightly. Don't blame yourself. These people are good at what they do. That's why Thornton uses them. He paused. There's something else you need to know. Grace braced herself. What? The day before the fire, I was meeting someone, Eli said quietly. Someone who'd promised me proof that Thornton was behind a series of cattle thefts. I was supposed to meet them in your barn at midnight. Grace's eyes widened. That's why you were there. That's why I was there, he confirmed. But when I arrived, the place was already burning. I got the horses out, tried to save what I could. By the time your father and the others arrived, all they saw was me standing in the ashes. And you never told anyone about the meeting because you were protecting your source. Eli's jaw tightened. My source never showed up. Either they were scared off, or they were never real to begin with. I think now it was a setup. Someone wanted me in that barn at that exact time. So they could frame you, Grace said, the pieces clicking together, and destroy my family's trust in you. Which meant I couldn't help you, couldn't defend you. Eli met her eyes, and which meant when Thornton made his move years later, there'd be no one to connect the dots. Grace felt anger rising, hot and bright. They used us. They used our trust, our reputations, our families. All of it was part of the plan. Eli nodded slowly. And now they're finishing what they started. Unless we stop them. The air between them felt charged, heavy with 6 years of unspoken things. Grace was suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how the fading light through the dusty window cast shadows across Eli's face, how his eyes held something that looked like regret and hope tangled together. "I'm sorry," Eli said, his voice rough, "for leaving the way I did, for not fighting harder to make you understand, for letting you believe I didn't care." Grace's throat tightened. "You broke my heart." "I know." She looked up at him. "Why are you really doing this? Why risk everything to help us now?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I never stopped loving you. And because if I can't have you, at least I can make sure you're safe." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Grace's heart hammered against her ribs. She should step back, should put distance between them, should remember that trust was earned, not given. But instead she reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the table. "Eli," she said softly. He turned his hand over, palm up, and she let him take her fingers. His hand was warm and calloused and familiar despite the years. "We can't go back," she said. "I know. But maybe we can go forward. If we survive this. When we survive this," he corrected. Grace felt the corner of her mouth lift despite everything. "You always were stubborn." "Takes one to know one," he said. And there was the ghost of his old smile, the one she remembered from before everything burned down. The moment stretched, fragile and precious. Then Eli released her hand and stepped back, the deputy mask sliding back into place. "We should head back before dark. Your father will worry." Grace nodded, trying to steady her breathing. "Tomorrow I'll bring the ledgers to town. We can go through them at the sheriff's office." Eli shook his head. "Not the sheriff's office. If there's someone in the clerk's office on Thornton's payroll, we can't trust who else might be compromised. Where then?" "There's a room above the general store. Widow Crane rents it out. She's discreet and she hates Thornton. He tried to buy her building last year." Grace managed a real smile at that. "Mrs. Crane's been feeding me peppermints since I was 6. She'll help." "Then it's a plan," Eli said. They walked out into the deepening twilight. The horses shifted at the rail, patient. Eli helped Grace mount, his hand steady on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Be careful riding back," he said. "And Grace?" She looked down at him. "Thank you for giving me a chance to make this right." They rode back toward the ranch together, until the fork in the road where Eli would turn toward town. At the split, Eli reined in. "I'll see you tomorrow. Noon at Mrs. Crane's." Grace nodded. "Tomorrow." She watched him ride away until he was just a silhouette against the darkening sky. Then, she turned Dancer toward home, her mind already racing ahead. Someone inside the ranch operation. Someone who'd been there long enough to know schedules, shipments, vulnerabilities. Someone who'd watched her family struggle and reported every detail back to Thornton. The betrayal stung worse than the financial threat. When she reached the ranch yard, full dark had fallen. Lantern light glowed from the main house windows. Her father met her at the barn. "Well, we have a plan," Grace said, dismounting. "Pa, I need to ask you something." Her father took Dancer's reins, began unsaddling the mare with efficient movements. "Ask. Who knew about the cattle shipment schedule 3 weeks ago, before it went out?" Her father paused. "Me. You. Caleb, since he was foreman and arranged the drovers. And the bank, since they held the note on the sale." Grace's stomach sank. "Caleb. Their foreman for 20 years. The man who'd taught her to ride, who'd worked alongside her father through droughts and hard winters, who'd been at their table for Christmas dinner every year since she could remember." "It can't be Caleb," her father said, reading her expression. "Grace, that man is family." "I know," she said quietly, "but we have to be sure." Her father's face hardened. "If you're wrong, you'll destroy a good man's reputation. If I'm right, he's already destroyed us." They stared at each other in the dim barn. Finally, her father nodded once, sharp and unhappy. "What do you need?" "I need to see the employee payment records for the last year. And I need you to keep Caleb away from the house tomorrow while I'm in town." Her father's eyes narrowed. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to save our ranch," Grace said. "Even if it means finding out someone we trusted betrayed us." Her father set down the saddle with more force than necessary. "If Caleb's clean, you apologize to him yourself. And if he's not, then I'll handle him," her father said grimly. "Personally." They walked back to the house in tense silence. Grace spent the evening going through the employee records by lamplight, comparing payments to work dates, looking for anything irregular. There. A pattern so subtle, she'd missed it before. 3 times in the past year, Caleb had taken personal days on the same dates that major ranch decisions had been made. The day they decided to expand the herd. The day they'd negotiated the water contract. The day they'd scheduled the cattle shipment. Each time, he'd ridden into town for supplies and returned late. Each time, shortly after, something had gone wrong. The expanded herd had suffered a mysterious illness. The water contract had been challenged. The shipment had vanished. Grace's hands shook as she wrote down the dates. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to ask questions. She closed the ledgers and blew out the lamp. Tomorrow she'd take everything to Eli. Tomorrow they'd start building a case. Tomorrow she'd find out if the man she'd trusted with her father's horses had sold them all out for Thornton's money. She barely slept. Dawn came cold and clear, the kind of morning that promised a hard freeze by evening. Grace dressed quickly, pinned her braid up tight, and carried the ledgers out to the barn while the house was still quiet. She saddled Dancer in the pre-dawn darkness, trying to move silently. "Pa," her father's voice came from the shadows. She startled. "You're up early." "So are you," Grace said. Her father stepped into the thin light, already dressed for the day's work. "I've been thinking about what you said. About Caleb. And I'm going to ride out with him this morning to check the north fence line. Keep him occupied." Grace felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you." Her father's expression was troubled. "Grace, if this goes wrong, if Thornton finds out we're investigating, he could move faster. Force the issue before the hearing." "I know," she said. "That's why we have to move faster. Be careful in town. And don't trust anyone except that deputy, no matter what they promise." Grace swung into the saddle. "What changed your mind about Eli?" Her father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your mother used to tell me I was too quick to judge, too slow to forgive. I didn't listen to her enough when she was alive. Maybe I should start now." Grace's throat tightened. "Mama would have liked what you just said." Her father almost smiled. "She would have clouded me for taking 6 years to say it. Now go. And Grace, whatever happens, I'm proud of you." She had to look away before the tears spilled. When she looked back, her father was already walking toward the bunkhouse to wake Caleb. Grace turned Dancer toward town and rode out as the sun broke over the eastern hills. The ride to Cedar Prairie took an hour. Grace used the time to rehearse what she'd say, how she'd present the evidence. By the time the town came into view, low buildings clustered along the main street, with a white church steeple rising above. She'd settled her nerves into something like calm. She tied Dancer outside the general store and carried the ledgers inside. Mrs. Crane looked up from behind the counter, her sharp eyes taking in Grace's tension. "Morning, dear. You're out early." Grace glanced around the empty store. "Is the upstairs room available?" Mrs. Crane's expression sharpened with interest. "Deputy Turner asked the same thing yesterday. Said you might be coming by." She pulled a key from her apron. "Top of the stairs, first door on the right. I'll make sure you're not disturbed." "Thank you, Mrs. Crane." The older woman touched Grace's arm. "Whatever trouble you're in, that young man's a good choice for help. I know what this town said about him 6 years ago. I also know most of it was horse manure." Grace felt her throat tighten. "Thank you for saying that. Someone should have said it louder 6 years ago," Mrs. Crane said tartly. "Now go on up. I'll send the deputy when he arrives." The upstairs room was small and clean, with a table, chairs, and a window overlooking the street. Grace set the ledgers down and paced, too nervous to sit. She heard boots on the stairs 15 minutes later. The door opened, and Eli stepped in, closing it behind him. He'd left his duster somewhere, wore just the black vest and white shirt, his badge catching the morning light. He looked tired, but alert. "Grace," he said, and his eyes went to the ledgers. "You found something." "I found a pattern," she said, and opened the top ledger to the pages she'd marked. Caleb's personal days. They line up with every major decision or shipment we've made this year. Eli moved beside her, studying the dates. She was aware of his shoulder nearly touching hers, the warmth of him in the small room. "This is good," he said after a moment. "But it's not enough for an arrest. We need to connect him directly to Thornton." "How?" Eli pulled out a chair, sat, gestured for her to do the same. "We set a trap. We create a piece of false information, something valuable that Thornton would act on immediately. We feed it to Caleb, and we watch to see where it goes." Grace sat slowly. "What kind of information?" "Your father announces he's found a buyer for the ranch at above market price," Eli said. "A private buyer from back east, cash sale, closing in 1 week. If Thornton hears that, he'll panic. He's invested months into this campaign. He'll either try to block the sale or accelerate his timeline. Either way, he'll have to move in the open. And if Caleb reports it, we'll know he's the leak." Grace's mind raced through the implications. If Thornton moves openly, we might be able to prove the connection. Get the evidence we need for the hearing. "Exactly," Eli said. "But there's risk. If Thornton panics badly enough, he might try something more direct." "Violence?" Grace's voice was steady, despite the chill that ran through her. Eli's expression was grim. "It's possible. That's why I'll be watching. And that's why you and your father need to be careful until this is over." "When do we start?" Grace asked. "Today," Eli said. "You go back to the ranch. Tell your father the plan. He announces the sale at dinner tonight with Caleb present. Make it casual, like good news he can't keep to himself. Tomorrow morning I'll be watching to see if Caleb makes an unexpected ride into town. If he does, I follow him to see where he goes." Grace nodded slowly. "And if he doesn't take the bait, then we try something else. But I think he will. The pressure's too high now. Thornton will want to know immediately if his plan is falling apart." Grace stood, moved to the window. The street below was starting to fill with morning activity. A wagon rolled past. 2 women stopped to talk outside the milliner's shop. Normal life continuing while everything Grace knew balanced on a knife's edge. "Eli," she said without turning around, "what happens if we win the hearing but lose the ranch anyway? If the cattle are really gone? If the bank forecloses despite everything? Then we find you a way to start over," Eli said quietly. She heard him stand, heard him move closer. She felt him stop just behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, but not touching. "Grace, we're going to win this. You're going to keep your ranch." She turned. They were inches apart. His face was open in a way she hadn't seen since before the fire, the careful deputy mask gone. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen what you built in 6 years," he said. "I've seen how you kept that place running when other ranches folded. I've seen your strength, and I'm not going to let Thornton or anyone else take that from you." The conviction in his voice made something in her chest crack open. "I'm scared," she admitted. "That's smart," he said. "But you're not alone." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself lean into the steadiness he offered. But 6 years of survival had taught her that relying on anyone was dangerous. "I should get back," she said, stepping away. "Pa will wonder where I am." Eli nodded, the distance between them suddenly feeling wider than the small room. "Grace, before you go." She paused at the door. "Be careful today. If Caleb suspects anything, If he asks questions, play it natural. Don't let him see that you know. I won't, she promised. Their eyes held for a moment. Then Grace picked up the ledgers and headed down the stairs. Mrs. Crane was ringing up a customer, but caught Grace's eye and nodded slightly. Grace stepped out into the bright morning, blinking against the sun. She untied Dancer, secured the ledgers in her saddlebag, and mounted. As she turned the horse toward home, she saw Eli watching from the upstairs window. The ride back felt longer. Grace's mind turned over every detail of the plan, looking for weaknesses. By the time she reached High Wind, the sun was high and the day had warmed. She found her father in the equipment shed, sharpening a plow blade. He looked up as she entered. Well? She told him everything. When she finished, her father set down the whetstone carefully. You want me to lie to a man who's worked for me 20 years, on the chance he's betraying us? I want you to test him, Grace corrected. If he's innocent, he'll never know. And if he's guilty, we'll have proof. Her father's jaw worked. What exactly do I say? She outlined the script. A buyer from Philadelphia. Cash offer. Closing next week. Good price, too good to refuse, but you're torn about selling the place your wife loved. Make it emotional. Make it real. Her father's eyes hardened. If Caleb has sold us out, I won't wait for the law. Pa, you can't, Grace said urgently. If you go after him, it'll ruin everything. It'll make us look guilty. Let Eli handle it. Since when do you trust that deputy? Her father challenged. Since I saw proof that he's been telling the truth all along, Grace said. And since he's risking his badge to help us. Her father studied her face. You've got feelings for him again. I never stopped having feelings for him, Grace said quietly. I just buried them. Her father sighed heavily. Your mother would know what to say right now. I don't. Just be careful, Grace, with the ranch and with your heart. I will, she promised. That evening, Grace helped the cook prepare dinner while listening for her father and Caleb to return from the fence line. They arrived as the sun was setting, dusty and tired. Grace set the table while the men washed up. Dinner was venison stew and cornbread, simple and filling. Halfway through the meal, her father cleared his throat. Caleb, I've got news. Might affect your job, so I wanted you to hear it direct. Caleb looked up, his weathered face attentive. Grace kept her eyes on her plate, heart pounding. Had an inquiry from a buyer back east, her father continued. Fellow named Harrison. Made an offer on the ranch. A good offer. Full price plus premium for quick closing. Caleb set down his fork. You're selling High Wind? Her father's expression was carefully troubled. Don't know yet. It's a lot of money. Enough to clear the debts, set Grace up comfortable, let me retire. But this place, it's all I've got left of Martha. Don't know if I can let it go. When's the decision have to be made? Caleb asked. His tone was neutral, but Grace caught something in his eyes. Sharpness. Interest. Closing set for next week if I agree, her father said. Fellow's in a hurry. Got other properties he's looking at. Needs an answer by Friday. That's fast, Caleb said. Real fast. Too fast? Her father asked, looking at his foreman. Caleb shook his head. No, sir. Just surprising is all. Didn't know you were thinking of selling. I wasn't. Until the offer came, her father said. Now I'm thinking, maybe it's time. Place is getting to be more than I can handle. Grace forced herself to speak. Pa, you haven't decided anything yet. We should talk about it more before Friday. Her father nodded. You're right. It's a big choice. He turned back to Caleb. Anyway, wanted you to know. If I do sell, I'll make sure the new owner keeps you on. You've earned that. Caleb's face was unreadable. Appreciate that, sir. They finished the meal in subdued quiet. After Caleb left for the bunkhouse, Grace and her father stood at the window, watching him cross the dark yard. Think he bought it? Grace asked quietly. Her father's expression was grim. Oh, he bought it. Question is what he'll do with it. Grace barely slept again. She was up before dawn, dressed and waiting by the barn when Eli rode in on his bay gelding, keeping to the shadows of the tree line. She walked out to meet him. He dismounted quietly. Any movement? Not yet, she said. Caleb's still in the bunkhouse. Eli checked the sky. Sun's not up yet. If he's going to ride out early, it'll be soon. They waited in the cold pre-dawn, hidden by the barn. Grace wrapped her shawl tighter against the chill. Eli stood close, his presence solid and warm. Minutes stretched. Then the bunkhouse door opened. Caleb emerged, already dressed, and headed straight for the corral. He caught and saddled his horse with quick efficiency, moving like a man with purpose. Grace's stomach clenched. He's going. Stay here, Eli said. I'll follow him. He mounted quickly, keeping his horse to a walk until he was well away from the buildings. Grace watched him go, her breath misting in the cold air. She waited until both riders had disappeared toward town before heading back to the house. Her father was in the kitchen making coffee. Well? Caleb rode out, Grace said. Eli's following him. Her father poured 2 cups with steady hands. Now we wait. The waiting was agony. Grace tried to focus on morning chores, but her mind kept circling. Where was Caleb going? Who was he meeting? Would Eli be able to track him without being seen? An hour passed. 2. The sun climbed higher, warming the morning. Grace was mucking stalls when she heard a horse coming fast. She dropped the pitchfork and ran to the yard. Eli dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. His face was hard, and his eyes were bright with anger. I followed him to Thornton's place, Eli said without preamble. Caleb rode straight to the main house, went inside for 20 minutes, then rode back. I couldn't get close enough to hear what was said, but the timing's clear. Grace felt sick. 20 years. He's been with us 20 years. Eli's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Grace. Her father appeared from the barn. Caleb? Eli nodded. Confirmed. He went straight to Thornton with the information. Grace's father's face went stony. Where is he now? Back at the ranch, Eli said. He doesn't know I followed him. Mr. Sinclair, I need you to let me handle this legally. If you confront him, we lose our case. I want him arrested, her father said flatly. For what? Eli asked. We don't have evidence of a crime yet. Talking to Thornton isn't illegal. But now we know the connection. We can use it. How? Grace asked. Eli's eyes were sharp. We let Caleb think the plan is moving forward. We make him believe the sale is happening. Meanwhile, I get a warrant to search the county clerk's office. If I can find the forged documents and tie them to Thornton, we can prove conspiracy. That gives us grounds to overturn the water rights order and possibly bring charges. Her father looked like he wanted to argue. Then, he nodded once, sharp. How long? A few days, Eli said. I need to convince Judge Morrison to sign the warrant. That means bringing him proof that's solid enough to risk a prominent businessman's reputation. I'll find it, Grace said. Both men looked at her. If Caleb's been reporting to Thornton, there might be records. Letters. Payment vouchers. Something in his personal things. You want to search his room? Eli said slowly. Grace met his eyes. I want to find proof that'll hold up in court. That's breaking and entering, her father pointed out. Not if I have the owner's permission, Grace said, looking at her father. This is my ranch. Caleb's room is my property. If I go through his things, it's not a crime. Eli's expression was torn. Grace, if he catches you. He won't, she said, with more confidence than she felt. He's out checking the south pasture right now. He won't be back until noon. Her father and Eli exchanged a look. Finally, Eli said, If you do this, I can't officially know about it, and you can't take anything. Just note what you find and where. Then I can use it to justify the warrant. Grace nodded. I understand. Her father's jaw was tight. I'll keep watch. You've got 30 minutes. After that, it's too risky. They moved quickly. Her father positioned himself by the equipment shed, where he could see anyone approaching. Grace and Eli crossed to the bunkhouse. Inside, the bunkhouse was dim and smelled of tobacco and leather. 4 narrow beds lined the walls. Caleb's was the one by the window, made with military precision. Grace moved to the small trunk at the foot of the bed. Her hands shook as she lifted the lid. Eli stood by the door, watching the yard. Inside the trunk were clothes, a Bible, a daguerreotype of a woman Grace didn't recognize. She lifted out the clothes carefully, feeling underneath. Her fingers touched paper. She pulled out a small bundle of letters tied with string. The top letter was addressed to Caleb in a careful hand. She opened it. The contents made her blood run cold. The letter was from Thornton, dated 4 months ago. It outlined payment for information, specific instructions on what details to report, and a promise of a foreman position on the consolidated property once the takeover was complete. Eli, Grace said quietly. He turned. She held up the letter. He crossed the room in 2 strides, read over her shoulder. There were 6 more letters in the bundle. Each one detailed information Caleb had provided, and payment received. The amounts were staggering, hundreds of dollars over the course of a year. Grace's hands shook with fury. He sold us out for money, for a promise of a job. Eli carefully noted the dates and key phrases from each letter. This is enough, he said. This is enough for the warrant, and probably enough for an arrest. But we need to put it back exactly as it was. Grace wanted to rip the letters to pieces. Instead, she refolded them carefully, retied the string, placed them back in the trunk under the clothes. They left the bunkhouse and crossed back to the barn. Her father met them. Well, we found letters, Grace said, her voice shaking. Written proof that Caleb's been selling information to Thornton for months. Her father's face went dark as a thunderhead. I want him gone. Today. Not yet, Eli said firmly. If we tip our hand now, Thornton will destroy evidence. We need to move carefully. I have what I need for the warrant. Give me until tomorrow. Then I'll have the proof to shut down Thornton's whole operation and arrest everyone involved. Her father looked like he wanted to argue. Then his shoulders sagged. 20 years, he said quietly. I trusted that man with my life. I'm sorry, sir, Eli said. Her father waved it off. Just get him. Get all of them. I will, Eli promised. He turned to Grace. Can you keep up the pretense until tomorrow? Act like nothing's changed? Grace's jaw was tight. I can do whatever I have to do. Eli held her gaze for a moment. I know you can. He mounted his horse. I'll be back tomorrow with the warrant and enough deputies to make this stick. Until then, watch your back. Both of you. He rode out at a lope. Grace and her father stood in the yard, the morning sun warm on their shoulders, and everything they'd built feeling fragile as spun glass. We'll get through this, her father said. Grace nodded. But when Caleb returned an hour later, smiling and asking about the fence repairs, it took everything she had not to scream at him. She smiled back, made casual conversation, and felt the weight of betrayal settle into her bones. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about trust and lies, and how easily one could be mistaken for the other. When dawn came, she was already dressed, pacing the kitchen. Her father joined her, silent and grim. They waited. Eli arrived mid-morning with 3 other deputies. They dismounted in the yard with the authority of the law behind them. Grace's father went out to meet them. Grace followed, her heart pounding. Caleb emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He saw the deputies, and his face went carefully neutral. Morning, Eli said. His voice was formal, all deputy now. Caleb Monroe, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud and theft. Caleb's face went white. Then he ran. He bolted for the corral, vaulted the fence with surprising speed for a man his age. One of the deputies shouted. Eli was already moving, running hard. Caleb reached his horse, grabbed the saddle horn. Eli caught him before he could mount, dragged him back. They went down in a tangle. Caleb threw a punch. Eli blocked it and pinned him face down in the dirt. You're under arrest, Eli said, breathing hard. You have the right to remain silent. The other deputies moved in, hauling Caleb to his feet. His face was dusty and full of rage. You don't understand, Caleb said, looking at Grace's father. Thornton said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure the bank foreclosed. I did it to save the ranch. You did it to save yourself, her father said coldly. And you destroyed us in the process. Caleb's expression crumpled. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Take him to the jail, Eli ordered. The deputies led Caleb away. He didn't resist, just walked with his head down, looking older than his years. Grace felt no satisfaction, only a hollow ache. Eli turned to them, his face serious. That's one piece. Now we go after Thornton. He pulled out another warrant. This one's for James Thornton. Charges of fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Judge Morrison signed it an hour ago based on the evidence we found. We're riding to his ranch now. I'm coming with you, Grace said, Eli shook his head. This could get dangerous. All the more reason, her father said. Grace turned to him. Pa. Her father's expression was firm. You've earned the right to see this through, and I trust the deputy to keep you safe. Eli looked between them. Then he nodded. Stay behind us. If shooting starts, you get to cover. Understood? Understood, Grace said. They rode out together, Grace on Dancer, her father on his big roan, Eli and his deputies forming a protective square around them. The ride to Thornton's ranch took 30 minutes at a hard pace. The property was sprawling and prosperous, with a big house and multiple outbuildings. They rode up to the main house and dismounted. Eli and 2 deputies went to the door. Eli knocked hard. The door opened. A house servant stood there, eyes wide at the badges. Is Mr. Thornton here? Eli asked. He's in his office, the servant stammered. We need to speak with him, Eli said. Now. They entered the house, boots loud on the polished floor. The office door was closed. Eli didn't knock, just opened it and walked in. James Thornton sat behind a massive desk. A well-dressed man in his 50s with cold eyes and a politician's smile. That smile faded when he saw the badges. What's the meaning of this? Thornton demanded. James Thornton, Eli said. I have a warrant for your arrest. Thornton's face went red. This is outrageous. On what charges? Fraud, conspiracy, and extortion related to illegal acquisition of property and water rights, Eli said. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights, Thornton snapped. And I know my lawyer. You'll regret this, Turner. I doubt that, Eli said. He gestured to the deputies. Search the office. Take any documents related to property transfers, water rights, or financial transactions. The deputies moved efficiently, pulling open drawers, checking filing cabinets. Thornton stood, face furious. You can't do this. I can, and I am, Eli said. Sit down, Mr. Thornton. Thornton remained standing. His eyes found Grace in the doorway. You, he said, his voice full of venom. This is your doing. You should have taken my offer when you had the chance. I never had a chance, Grace said quietly. You made sure of that. One of the deputies held up a ledger. Found something. Detailed records of payments to Caleb Monroe. And? He flipped pages, payments to a clerk in the county office. Names, dates, amounts. Eli took the ledger, scanned it. His expression hardened. This is enough to bring charges against half the county office. Thornton, you're done. Thornton's face went from red to pale. You can't prove anything. This ledger proves everything, Eli said. He nodded to the deputies. Take him. They restrained Thornton and let him out. He went stiffly, his face a mask of rage. Grace and her father followed the procession outside. As they loaded Thornton into a wagon for transport to the jail, Eli turned to them. The water rights order will be overturned by end of day. Judge Morrison's already drafting the reversal. Your ranch is safe. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you. Eli's expression softened. You did this, Grace. You found the evidence. You had the courage to see it through. Her father stepped forward, extended his hand. Eli looked surprised, then shook it. I was wrong about you, her father said. 6 years wrong. I'm sorry for that. Eli's throat worked. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. Her father nodded. You're welcome at High Wind any time. And he glanced at Grace. If you've got business with my daughter, I won't stand in the way. Heat rose in Grace's face. Eli's eyes met hers, a question in them. Her father cleared his throat. I'll ride back with the deputies. Give you two a chance to talk. He mounted his horse and joined the wagon convoy heading toward town. Grace and Eli stood alone in Thornton's yard. The silence stretched. Then Eli said, Grace, I meant what I said yesterday about never stopping loving you. Grace's heart hammered. 6 years is a long time. I know. But some things don't change. He took a step closer. I don't expect you to forgive me for leaving. I don't expect you to trust me right away. But if you'll give me a chance, I'll spend every day proving I'm worth it. Grace looked at him. Really looked. At the man he'd become. Strong and steady and willing to risk everything for what was right. The boy she'd loved had grown into someone she could respect. Someone she could lean on. Someone who'd fight beside her, instead of leaving when things got hard. I'm scared, she admitted, of getting hurt again. That's fair, he said. I'm scared too. Of letting you down. Of not being enough. She reached out, touched his hand. You were always enough, Eli. I just couldn't see it through the fear. He turned his hand over, laced his fingers with hers. So where does that leave us? Grace took a breath. It leaves us here. Starting over. Taking it slow. Seeing if what we had can become something stronger. A smile broke across Eli's face, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Slow I can do, as long as it's heading somewhere. It is, Grace said. She stepped closer, rose on her toes, and kissed him. Soft, and careful and full of promise. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright. I've waited 6 years for that, he said, his voice rough. Was it worth the wait? He kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms coming around her. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. That answer your question? He asked. Grace laughed, the sound surprising her. Yes. They stood together in the morning sun, the worst behind them, and the future spreading out wide and uncertain and full of possibility. We should head back, Grace said eventually. There's a lot to do. Fixing the ranch, clearing the water rights, dealing with everything Thornton destroyed. Eli nodded. I'll help. Whatever you need. They rode back to High Wind side by side, not speaking much, just being together. When they reached the ranch, Grace's father was waiting in the yard. He took one look at their faces and smiled. About time, he said. Then he went inside, leaving them alone. Eli dismounted, helped Grace down. His hand stayed on her waist. I should get back to town. File the reports. Grace nodded. Will you come for dinner tomorrow? Eli's face lit. I'd like that. Then it's a date, she said. He kissed her once more, quick and sweet. Then he mounted and rode away. Grace watched until he was out of sight. Then she turned and walked into the house that was finally, truly safe. The next weeks were a blur of activity. The water rights were restored. The bank, under pressure from the judge, restructured the loans to manageable terms. Thornton and his co-conspirators went to trial. Caleb Monroe pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years. Grace testified, her voice steady, telling the whole story. When it was over, she walked out of the courthouse into bright sunshine and found Eli waiting. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," she said. They walked down the main street of Cedar Prairie together. People stared. Some whispered. Grace didn't care. Let them talk. She knew the truth now. So did everyone who mattered. That evening at Highwind, Grace helped her father plan the spring planting. They'd hire new hands to replace Caleb. They'd rebuild what had been damaged. They'd move forward. A knock at the door interrupted dinner. Grace answered it. Eli stood on the porch, hat in hand. "Evening," he said. "Evening," she replied, smiling. "You here for dinner?" "Actually," he said, "I'm here to ask your father something." Grace's heart skipped. She stepped aside. Eli came in, nodded to her father. "Mr. Sinclair, I'd like permission to court your daughter. Properly. With the intention of marriage, if she'll have me." Grace's father set down his fork. He looked at Eli for a long moment. Then, he looked at Grace. "You want this?" "More than anything," Grace said. Her father smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. "Then you have my blessing. Both of you." Eli's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you, sir." Her father stood, shook Eli's hand. "Now sit down and eat before the food gets cold. Welcome to the family." Dinner was warm and full of laughter and planning. After, Grace and Eli walked out into the cool evening. The stars were bright overhead, the prairie wind soft. They stopped by the corral fence. Eli turned to her. "Grace Sinclair, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, not even hesitating. "Yes, I will." He pulled her close and kissed her under the stars. When they finally pulled apart, Grace rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We're going to have a good life," Eli said quietly. "The best life," Grace agreed. They stood together as the moon rose, two people who'd been broken and betrayed, and had found their way back to each other. The past was finally behind them. The future was theirs to build. And this time, nothing would tear them apart. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the white church on the hill. The whole town turned out. Mrs. Crane cried through the whole ceremony. Grace's father walked her down the aisle, with his head high. And when Eli took her hand and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to stand beside you in danger and in peace. I promise to trust you with the truth, even when it's hard. I promise to build a life with you that's worth all we went through to get here." Grace's vows were just as strong. "I promise to believe in you, even when others don't. I promise to fight for us the way we fought for justice. I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life." The minister pronounced them husband and wife. Eli kissed her while the church erupted in applause. They walked out into the sunshine together, married and whole and free. That night, in the house Eli had rented in town, they lay together in the darkness. Grace traced the scar above his eyebrow. "How'd you get this?" "Bar fight in Denver," Eli admitted. 2 years ago. I was working undercover, tracking a forgery ring." She kissed the scar. "You're going to have to tell me all your stories." He smiled against her hair. "I've got a lifetime to tell them. And I've got a lifetime to listen," Grace said. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the past finally laid to rest, and the future bright with promise. High Wind Ranch prospered under Grace's management and Eli's steady support. They had 3 children over the next decade. 2 daughters and a son, all strong and stubborn and raised to value truth over reputation. Grace never stopped running the ranch books. Eli never stopped wearing the badge. Together they built something that lasted. A partnership. A love. A legacy. And on warm, summer evenings, they'd sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the prairie, and Grace would think about how close she'd come to losing everything. How one man's courage and one woman's determination had saved them both. How the hardest battles were the ones that led to the sweetest victories. And she'd reach for Eli's hand, and he'd squeeze back, and they'd sit in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd fought their way through fire and scandal and betrayal to find each other again. It was more than she'd ever hoped for. It was everything she'd never dared to dream. It was home.